Hello and welcome to Real Chat with Kat, the podcast dedicated to igniting your entrepreneurial spirit and empowering you to conquer new horizons. In this podcast, we chat with inspiring entrepreneurs on their journey to success through some amazingly insightful and expansive conversations. These episodes thrive on thought-provoking chats where our guests fearlessly explore their path to success, sharing their experiences, failures, and triumphs. No topic is off limits as we deep dive into the talked about and not so talked about pieces it takes to build a business, overcome limiting beliefs, deal with personal struggles, and everything in between that shapes our lives and our businesses. I'm your host, Kat Polsinelli, creator and founder at The Lotus Effect, where we believe that success is not just about strategies and tactics, it's about cultivating a powerful mindset and creating customized business operations that align with you and your true purpose. Whether it's mastering time management, improving productivity, enhancing leadership skills, or simply fostering a growth-oriented mindset, we'll provide you with the tools and strategies to flourish in both your business and personal life. I'm so excited to have you join us today in this episode, so get ready to feel empowered and inspired as we learn together and from one another on how to rise above challenges, break through limitations, and unlock our full potential. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today in this episode. I'm so excited to have you here with us today with my amazing guest, Taresa Scott. So, Taresa, do us a favor, introduce yourself, tell us who you are, what it is that you do, and what got you into this space.
Good thing, Kat. So, of course, again, my name is Taresa Scott. I am a learning and development program strategist and the founder of Blueprint. And so the focus of what we do is we partner with talent development leaders, and these are folks who we consider to be subject matter experts. They might be subject matter experts on communication strategies, diversity, equity, inclusion, branding, marketing, leadership development, a wide range of topics, but we partner with them to help them design, develop, and deliver just inclusive and engaging online learning solutions. So really leveraging e-learning in addition to the workshops and the virtual leader-led sessions that they hold on a recurring basis. So that is, it's a very complex thing, but that's the simplified version of what I do and the level of support that I add for my clients.
Which I think is just like super awesome. And we talked about this before, that you want to help the corporations and create this line of communication, this streamlined process for people learning and being efficient in what they're doing, which is awesome because, most people that you meet that are entrepreneurs are like the opposite, right? They're like, I want nothing to do with corporate, get me out of it. But at the same time, right, not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. Not everybody can be one. And so corporate still needs help. And so I love it when I find people that still want to incorporate those pieces and make sure that larger companies are taking care of the people that work for them and they're getting the efficiency and the communication and the level of support that they need through the tools that you provide.
Oh, absolutely. The biggest thing is, when I talk about subject matter experts, these are teams that they're doing training, they're going into these mid to large organizations and they're helping their teams to operate more efficiently. Whether it is a large organization like an AT&T or eBay or someone that caliber, they're working with these leaders within the organization to help them, go through collaborating better. How do you talk together better? How do we better push out a process? How do we just better collaborate, communicate? It's so varied, but it all comes down to soft skills. We're in a day and age where, especially with this virtual workforce that we work in, is how do we still connect? How do we still collaborate? How do we still, be considerate of our varied backgrounds, our cultures, the experiences? All these things kind of come together, and it's so important when you're giving training and education. You're trying to, put together a very diverse team. You want them to work better. You want them to function better. You want the performance to increase. You want people to minimize the stress so they can be great in their job roles as a whole, or even grow within your organization. It's so important to have these resources, to have that support, to have that training that helps you help to get it done. At the end of the day, I tell people, like, when you work in an organization, it is an ecosystem. No matter what the department is, we all work together. So when we come in and do that education and training, that's all what it comes down to, how to work better together.
Yeah, definitely. Now I got to backtrack a little bit too, because I want the audience to understand, like, how on earth did you get into this? Like, what was the thought process? What led you into wanting to help these larger organizations?
You know, to be completely transparent, and this might sound crazy, but it was sheer curiosity. So, and what I mean by that is, prior to getting into the world of learning and development and instructional design and all of that, I was working in digital marketing and sales. And at the same time, I was getting my degree, my bachelor's degree. And for me, I was helping my team members who were coming in, get trained in the system. Hey, here's some pro tips, tools, and tricks how to navigate the system. They had sales calls. I'm jumping on the phone. Like, these are how you complete your sales. Maybe we can close some deals. Like, I was in the thick of it already. Like, I would host little sessions with my team on system training. Like, I was doing it all already. So my student services counselor came to me one day. She said, and her husband actually was my coworker at the time, that, Taresa, we're introducing this new program for instructional design technology at the university. I think there might be a lot of parallels of what you do in your day-to-day that could really be complementary to this program. This is going to be, growing field, education, everything. So I thought, okay, she explained it to me. I thought about some of the things I've been doing. So I said, all right, cool. So I finished my bachelor's degree. I went back for my master's degree. So it's a Master of Science in Education.
Wow.
But the focus was on instructional design and technology. And I got into it. I thought, whoa, I never knew something like that existed, where it was, and I'll kind of back up a little bit. So the process of instructional design is really like adult learning theory. So it's the science behind how we learn, absorb, and retain information. So it's very strategic, because a lot of times folks who go out and they say, okay, well, I do training. Well, what happens is a lot of people are subject matter experts. They know their thing that they're very good at. Like I said, it can be any topic. You know that thing, you know it so well. You say, you know what, I want to go back and I want to share this knowledge with others. Well, a lot of times that information doesn't get translated properly, because you forget that the person on the receiving end of your information has no idea what you're talking about. They want to learn it, but you overload them with so much information at a time, and a lot of times it's only delivered one way. When you deliver things in one fashion, you're omitting somebody who has a different type of learning style. When you overload with information, people can't retain that, they can't absorb it. That's just too much. So where I am the liaison, well, like myself and my team are the liaison, is saying, okay, provide us with the content. What are some of the objectives? What is the whole goal of why you want to train and educate these folks? And that's to get an understanding of their audience, because at the end of the day, you wouldn't talk to the construction worker the same way you talk to the guy who in the retail, nor that you wouldn't talk to the same person in the call center. So you have to understand who your audience is, nail down what it is they need to know, and then deliver a solution that targets that. And it serves up in different ways. So I always talk to people about, you see good learning has storytelling graphics that complement the information on the page, where there's a simulation where you're training somebody on how to navigate a new system, or a scenario-based learning, like you see a video where there's a little bit of dialogue and back and forth of a good and bad scenario. All those things are put together for a rhyme and reason, so we can digest that information and know exactly what it is, how to apply it, and then turn around and apply that in the real world. So that's how that whole formula kind of comes together. And yes, that's also how I got into it, though. Like I said, just like that was a long answer, but really just pure curiosity, like, and wanting to learn more and help and educate.
I love that. And you're so right. And I think that we forget that on so many different levels. Like, it even comes down to like how you parent. Like, we forget as parents, like, what it was like to be a kid and how they intake information versus how we shout at them information, right? Like we don't think about it. It's so true, especially, I worked in management, I worked in medical administration. Like, you're right, I had to learn that because in the beginning, I tried to teach everybody the way that I did it. And it wasn't until someone actually came to me and was like, you realize I don't have a freaking clue what you're teaching me, right? And I was like, well, why? Like, this is easy. And she's like, well, yeah, it is to you because you already know it. And I was like,
exactly.
Oh, okay. So you really do have to create that space of like curiosity and understanding. And I love that you have to have like this futuristic perspective of who the people are and how you can touch people on different levels of learning. And that's difficult, in my opinion, right? Like, even working with someone one-on-one, it's a little bit easier because you can ask tons of questions. You're talking to an entire group that is then going to push it out to their employees. And that's hard. So do you find that, more people tend to learn visually versus audio, or is there one side more that tends to sway, or how does that work? Because like some people prefer not to read jack anything, and then like some people prefer to read all of it versus trying to listen to you because it doesn't make sense. So how does that all play in?
It's honestly a combination of all of it. In theory, 70% of what we learn is through social, like things we talk about, things that get discussed. And that is a piece that's so important. That's why I talk to my clients about, the workshops, the social learning, the live session. I wouldn't take that away. But when it comes down to it, the other 30% comes down to what we are able to read, some being hands-on, all those things in combination. But the biggest thing, first and foremost, is really understanding people. Like, I always tell people, we're in the business of people, like that, to solve people problems, provide people solutions, because when you understand the audience, how those people learn, how they get information, then you're also really able to tailor that experience. Because going back to it, some people, they want to look up information on their phone. They might want to have a tablet. Not everyone sits at a desk. 80% of the workforce is what's called a deskless employee, where they're out and about, they're in a shop, they're on the go. And these are all people I call modern learners, because they're busy, they're professionals, but they want to learn, but it has to be easily accessible to them. It has to be relatable to them. So when you understand people and you actually sit down and have a conversation with the managers and some of the frontline employees and really understand how they absorb this information, how it connects to them, that is when you can really go in and say, okay, these are the objectives and this is how I can train this particular group. Because no one person is the same, and they're all gonna need a combination of several elements. There's just no one way, but you have to understand those people first.
Yeah. And you said 80% of jobs are deskless?
Deskless. So when you think about people who are nurses, retail, like,
oh yeah.
Like you see, you can't forget those
Hello.
people. You can't forget them. That's why it's so important for mobile learning to be accessible. I always talk to people about, it when you think about mobile responsive, we talk about mobile responsive a lot when we think about website design or website development. Same thing with learning. Can you view it on every device? Because and can that be delivered to those folks? Can you reach them? That is something extremely important. We can't exclude those folks. We need those people, and we work with them every day. We do business with them. We need these folks, and we need to make sure they have the education too.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I don't know why I didn't think about that. And my other question was, you were talking about how people learn and how they intake stuff, and you're basing it on the companies. Do you ever find that, and this is just a curiosity question like popped up, when you're working with particular companies, do you find that based on the conversations you have with the leaders, the people tend to learn a little bit of a similar way because they're in that workforce versus like another one that might be a little bit, I don't know why that hit me, but I was like, okay, when you said construction workers earlier and you were talking about, I was like, okay, I wonder if they like kind of learn similar, even though, we learn differently. But if you happen to notice like a pattern, because they're all in that company versus something that maybe is structured completely different, which uses a different part of the brain, and maybe you notice that like they learn a little bit differently on those levels. Sorry, geeky moment, y'all.
No. I think in a sense, kind of yes and no. For me, I look at it's kind of more so based on the industry. Because if you think about like a software engineer versus somebody who does retail, now I feel like people in certain industries have similar learning styles, because when it comes to organization, sometimes that can be factual. They'll learn based on how the organization is, but then some of it is, does the organization have the resources to even support it? Because the reality is they may want it served up to it in a specific way, but the organization does not provide that to them. And they may be requesting, they have a demand for it, they can, and it could be things of budget or what have you that deter it. But I would say it comes down to more of industry, because I've partnered with companies and I've seen where, okay, well, this industry, like these software engineers at these different companies, they want to learn this information the same way, but how they consume it is different because of what the resources are that are accessible to them.
Okay, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there's so many different levels and so many different factors and pieces. Good gracious.
That's why I said it's so important to understand people first,
Yeah, definitely. So tell me then, like, what is your understanding of people? Like, where is your, like, when you're chatting with people and you're learning about them, or you're working with these leaders, what are some of the key things that like you kind of pay attention to that really help you assess how they are going to present this, or how it should be presented to other people?
Honestly, I think about the objectives. So like understand the people first, but then thinking about the objectives, like what is the end goal of the training, which is kind of backwards in a sense. But for me, I want to begin with the end in mind, because knowing what you want people to do differently, or how you want them to behave, or how you want them to act, whatever that case is, it's so important to know those objectives first. Because for me and my team, then we can navigate and say, okay, I think for this particular section, whether let's say it's a DE&I assessment, maybe it'll be a little more engaging, interactive to serve up this assessment in more of a conversational format or interactive format, where they're able to see a question, but they can select their responses. No right or wrong, but it helps to drive learning home, because again, this could be a very complex topic. So how can we make this complex topic simplified down to where people don't feel overwhelmed or deter from stepping into it, where they can have a level of comfort saying, okay, well, these are the responses, let me select this, and providing feedback along the way. I think you just have to be very thoughtful about how that person on the other end might receive it. What are those end goals to really say what's the best solution? Like another example, I worked with recruiting teams before, and they say, well, we have this one system, but we want to introduce this brand new system into our teams. We want them to start using this. Well, typically most people are apprehensive to new things, new systems, especially if they feel like, you're constantly changing things, business constantly evolving, and I want to get an understanding of, well, if we have the system, let's talk about creating a simulation for them. The simulation creates like a sandbox environment. Typically, most people who are afraid of new systems or trying new things is because they don't understand it. They don't feel like trying to learn it. A lot of times get a new system, that technology team or whatever the case is that they got it from doesn't actually provide a lot of e-learning to walk them through it, and courses and things of that nature. They might have live sessions, but maybe you can't attend, and all of this. It's just, there could be a lot of barriers to access. So if you give them that, if you leverage e-learning, give them a simulation, walk them through the steps, show them why do you click on this, what happens when you do that. Again, it helps them feel a little more empowered to have that resource to really show them what is it that you need me to do in this system, so I can be most effective in my role. So I don't spend time spinning my wheels trying to figure out this thing, whereas I can just learn it and then say, okay, and learn it in a live or a sandbox environment, and take it directly to the real life thing, and I can be effective in my job. So just a couple of examples to kind of hit home for that.
Yeah, no, I love that. And that makes so much sense because, when I worked for
a brokerage, we had to implement a brand new e-signature platform. And this company had been using the one for like ever, right? And we had a huge range of newer agents and younger people, and then those that, are in their upper 60s that have been using the same program as well. And unfortunately, due to some legality things, like the system had to be cut out. Like no one could even use it. And so I took over that project of learning the ins and outs of it and then teaching all of the tech classes. And you're so right, because depending on who I was dealing with or who I was working with, you could tell even by age, the ones that were like a little bit more like, oh, this is kind of cool, like we can figure it out. And you could talk to them on one level. And then you did have the older generation is like, I don't want to learn anything. Like I've been doing this for this long. I don't want to do this. And you're right, it's intimidating. And it's a lot to take over, especially when you're in the middle of working your business and you're having to learn that system while you're still trying to work and you don't have the time to figure it out in between, right? And that's kind of what ended up happening with us. And so you're so right. Like when I dealt with the different generations, it was a total different conversation. And there were a lot more things where I had to explain it in a little bit more detail and explain why they were using it. And what I did was I compared it to the old system and took from that and was like, okay, well, you remember where this did this? Great. So this is the same thing. It just functions like this. And it was like, oh, okay, that makes sense, right? And so it was that familiarity of bringing that to them and connecting the two that really helped them understand that while it may be new, it's still familiar, right? There are things you can find that are similar in it. Most things aren't going to be so gigantically different that it's like smacking everything new on them and they can't even compare before.
Exactly. That's what it comes down to. Like, and I always tell people this: think about any job that you've worked at any point in your life, currently, previously. It can be the most frustrating thing coming into a new role, having new systems and process in an existing role, or even get promoted to the next role. And you want to be great. You want to do your job. You want to use your time most efficiently, but how much time do you spend trying to figure out the job that you've been asked to do, or figure out the task that you've asked, or whatever that thing is, like whether it's managing people, whether it's systems, whether it's your branding, the marketing, if it's how to communicate, how to collaborate with this different department team, whatever that thing is, how much time do we spend trying to get to that next step or explaining things when we could really have resources in place to empower that learner, to empower that professional, empower their employee so they can feel more secure in what they are trying to achieve in their day-to-day. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah. And resources like that right there in itself is such a powerful word that a lot of people don't think about, because you do see with a lot of corporations and well, to be honest, even entrepreneurs that, okay, for example, entrepreneurs that are trying to bring in an admin or a VA, but don't have their systems in place. So they bring someone into their, for lack of a better term, shit show. And they're like, well, I just need you to do this. And they expect that person to know the systems and be able to figure it out versus like, what I do with my clients that are looking to bring in an admin or a VA, we create those and we create resources. Like, I love that you said that, because I literally will create just a document of resources. And sometimes it's Loom videos, sometimes it's links from different places where they can find the information to where they can get, if they do get stuck, right, they can go back to that first. And it takes a couple of minutes for them to go through and be like, oh, okay, never mind, right? Versus someone that doesn't know where to go to or is afraid to ask for help, right? Because we have people on all different levels and scales. Not everybody is like, hey, I don't get this, right? A lot of people are like, oh God, I can't tell them I don't get this because they're going to fire me. So I'm going to try to figure it out on my own. But then they don't get their job done because they're trying to figure it out, or they don't ask at all. And then they screw something up so they get in trouble anyway. Like there's like this
stressed out, overworked. It's just a mess. And and here's the thing I want to piggyback on. You said earlier about, a business owner or a growing business starting to hire employees and say, here, just do this thing. So here's the key component about that. There are people that you hire into your business, to your organization, your team, whatever, they're going to know that job, hence why you hire them. But the importance of training is, how do you want them to do that thing for your business? How does that look in your business, on your team, across your organization? Because they could do that thing. If you say, just do this, okay, I can just do it, but then it might just be done wrong because that's not the way that you wanted it done.
Yeah.
Because I've had those conversations too. Again, what resources have you provided to them? Whether it's live, whether it's an e-learning course, whether it's a document, what steps did you provide to them so they knew exactly how it is to your business? Same thing with the organization. If you have employees, frontline employees representing your teams, how do you want them to represent your brand and your company? Because they should be advocates of your brand through that training. That's how they walk, talk, move. That if you, especially a sales team or a field service team, anybody going out that's representing your brand, how is that training being delivered to them so they know how to represent you out there? Because you can't be everywhere, but they are. Again, there are so many ways to leverage e-learning and training for your business, like I said, to educate on so many levels. Like, just really, and that's why I like to present opportunities to think outside the box, like of how we can really leverage that. Because again, it's about elevating. It's about elevating the clients we work with, the people that are receiving the training, to empower everyone.
Yeah. And I feel like you need to have, like you're saying, like a combination of how you're teaching people as well. Because I do see that, entrepreneurs and some small businesses and things as well, where they have a lot of really good information, but they, like you were saying in the beginning, they shove all of it on them to learn with no like hands-on, like nothing to actually work and try out. So you expect them to retain all this information that they just learned over, let's say, like a week or two, and then you throw them into real life scenarios and you're like, oh, okay, figure it out, like you're good, right? You learned it.
All right, there you go.
Like,
Have fun.
I don't even retain that much information. You know how many times I need to go back through stuff and I got to Google it, leave it up on my screen, and I come back to it 3 times because I read the whole paragraph and caught like 2 sentences.
And if you're wondering why you can't retain your employees or your team or whoever, you have to start taking a step back and look from the outside in and saying, okay, is it them? Is it me? It's okay to do a trust check and ask yourself some questions, evaluate yourself. That's why with my clients is why I talk about, getting that feedback also. We want to be able to measure success in addition to, because we again, understanding people is first and foremost, and another way to understand people is say, hey, did this resonate with you? Do you feel more secure in doing your job now? Asking those real questions to understand, what's this a good use of your time? All of these things to know, did we make you better? Do you feel more equipped now going forward? So there's so many things to just really consider.
Yeah. Now, do you feel like, since you're talking about leadership and basically being curious, right, and asking questions, do you feel like that's a common conversation that you have to have with them to almost kind of remind them that, like, hey, not everybody understands this. And if you aren't asking for information and you're not asking questions or make it a safe environment, so many people are going to go through it and say that they learned it and move on, when in reality, they didn't understand any of it. So you're not getting the proper feedback. Do you feel like that's a conversation that you have to have with a lot of people to remind them of where they're at versus where their employee may be, and like bridging that gap?
I think I would say I would have to all the time, because a beautiful thing about the clients we support, they're already curious, like they're passionate about what they're trying to educate and teach, and they know and they recognize things could be improved a little bit better. And so what I will say is I make sure to have that conversation every time, because again, for me, I want to be proactive rather than reactive. And so a piece of it is saying, let me bring this to your attention, because I haven't had anyone be receptive to it. I think that sometimes we just don't think about some of those pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And you ask someone, and again, you come to myself and my team, and I want to make sure I educate you and let you know, hey, we are going to ensure that we do evaluations, get that feedback, ask how it's going, because the reality is too, when it comes down to it, a lot of topics and things should be reevaluated every 90 days as well. I've worked with teams where some things can be set it and forget, some things with compliance kind of stay as is for a little bit of time. Some laws, things change, you might have to go back and update it. But so other topics, we have to navigate with the pivot, from COVID to the Great Resignation to, layoffs. There's just so many things happening in the world. E-learning should also be a living, breathing thing that we reassess on a recurring basis as well. So I think there's just a number of ways to kind of look at it, but absolutely, I want to make sure we have a conversation every time. So, well, I wouldn't say have to, but it is a must conversation that I'm going to have that they always appreciate.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you said that too, that some people just don't think about it, because, you do hear in the workforce, in people that work for entrepreneurs, you see it on social media where you see a lot of people complaining, right? Well, they don't understand me, or they didn't offer this, blah, blah, blah. And I think that people forget that those that are leading us, or those that we are working for, sometimes just don't think about it because they're in a totally different space, and they may not necessarily have the capacity to remember what it's like being in your position. And it's not always done, in an egotistical or a negative way, or it's done on purpose. Like you said, it's just some people, we just don't think about it. Once you get to a different level, or you're focused on this different thing, you don't always necessarily pay attention to the stuff at the bottom. And so that can make that disconnect. But I do think that, when you said that, people that are here that are supposed to be learning need to learn to ask questions as well, because it may just be that person that is supposed to be teaching you or showing you doesn't even realize that what you're seeing isn't connecting with you.
Absolutely. And that's why I talk about being curious. I mean that at so many different levels, because the more that you ask questions, like genuinely wanting to know, that's how you grow. That's how you get better. That's how you gather the feedback, gather the details, improve experiences. And as consumers, we get that all the time. We get those surveys in our emails, and we see this here and there. We get that all the time. It's just it's being more intentional about asking the questions, and then asking the right questions on top of it to really get the feedback. I tell people the good, the bad, the ugly, because you really want to know, because if everything's all good, then it's all good. We want to have the yes, no, we want the 5-star, check the box, but that's cool. But to really elevate, let's get it all. Let's ask it. let's really get down to it and get that feedback. Because otherwise, without it, you'll find yourself being stagnant if you're afraid to ask the questions, or you're not intentional with asking the right questions.
When you leave, you almost create a safe space for people when you do that as well, right? Because then if you can see what changes need to be done, and you actively approach it from that position, then people are more likely to come to you or put in a review or something like, hey, this is some things that need to be worked on, versus those few people in some situations where they may mention something like once or twice, but the person doesn't resonate or pay attention to it. So it just continues on being the way it is. And I think that's where that disconnect comes in, and that frustration comes in. And you're right. It literally comes back down to communication and being curious instead of being reactive, like you said earlier. We have to learn to come from that different space when we're conversating with people. And this goes for personal and professional, right? This can affect your relationships as well. If you can learn to be curious in your relationships with your kids, because we're not on the same level, we're not on the same mindset, we're not on the same perspective, no matter who you're talking to. And you're right, that piece of curiosity, I think, could save so many problems just by starting there. And like you said, asking the right questions. And if you don't know what the right question is, just ask, and you'll come up with it.
Yeah. And ask what it is, or even ask, what are some other thoughts or suggestions or feedback that you would like to provide to us? Open up the floor to say, is it because there may be something there that was very intentional, very good question to ask, but maybe it's still something that was on their mind they missed. We want to hear your voice, that type of thing, opening that space where they can add in additional thoughts. I think that the reality is people understand that we are all human, and so it might have been bad the first time, but then it gets good, and then it gets great, and then it gets excellent. And like you said, to your point, that safe space, we're creating that space to say, you know what, we value your feedback, and valuing shows how we've improved based on what you delivered to us. So when that's a cyclical effect, and like, and to your point, every aspect from professional, personal, business, whatever the case is, learning, feedback, people, is all universal, honestly.
It is. You're so right. So if anybody got anything from this today, right, it's be curious, ask questions, communicate, like seriously, and understand that everybody is here. And you're so right. Like, we do forget that. I think we live in this world of like always searching for perfectionism. We're trying it ourselves, and then we expect other people to be like that. And when people fall below that line, a lot of us tend to tear other people apart, and we forget that there is that human piece. And like, we screw up, and a lot of times it's not intentional, but we have to be reminded of that. We have to know what we even did in order to be able to correct it, right?
Yeah. So yeah, and that's why I would say we get better together. That's working with Blueprint is a collaborative experience. We're working through things together. Wherever you are in that journey, whether, like you say, whether you feel like it's good, it's okay, it can be better. We'll meet you where you are, and we'll elevate together. So that's the name of the game. Just growing together to be better together. So.
Yeah, and I love that. So I always ask one question before we leave, and that is, do you happen to have a quote or a piece of advice you'd like to leave the audience with?
Oh, now I actually put up a wonderful quote on my LinkedIn the other day that I just absolutely love. If you give me out.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I want to read this one out because this one was by far my favorite. And the quote is from Benjamin Franklin. It is, "Tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I learn."
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
That's a really good one. That's a really good reminder. I like that. Well, Taresa, I appreciate you so much for coming on here today and sharing your expertise and being a part of the podcast. So tell the audience, like, where can they find you? How can they connect with you? How can they be in your world if they'd like to learn more?
Yes. So I am on LinkedIn. You can find me under my name, Taresa Scott, Taresa. Please do reach out, connect, shoot a message. I'll be happy to chat with you and connect over the next couple of weeks. That's how you find me.
Yeah, you guys definitely have to connect with her too. She's so much fun. But that's just a side note. So, but Taresa, I can't thank you enough for being a guest today. And everybody else, I really hope that you guys got some amazing takeaways. And, I heard this conversation a lot about communication and being curious. And I love that this conversation is something that is starting to come up a lot more in our world. So to everybody out there, I hope that you got some amazing nuggets from this. Be sure to connect with Taresa on LinkedIn. Don't worry, we'll have all that information in the show notes. And don't forget, until next time, do one thing each day for someone else and see the difference that it makes in your life. So until next time, have a fantastic day.
Hello again, and thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today. If you enjoyed this episode and it brought tons of value, we ask that you please share, like, and subscribe. Your support means the world to us and helps us to reach even more inspiring entrepreneurs who can benefit from these powerful conversations. If you haven't already, be sure to leave a review on your favorite podcast platform, as this feedback is an amazing gift that fuels our growth and helps us to continually improve this podcast. Looking for an extra dose of inspiration and empowerment? Then be sure to connect with me on social media. You can find me at The Lotus Effect, where I share valuable resources and tips while sharing my own journey of being an entrepreneur. And if you're interested in learning more about my coaching programs and services, be sure to check out my website at the-lotus-effect.com. Once again, thank you so much for being a part of Real Chat with Kat. Your presence and support makes all the difference. Remember, whether you find yourself in the depths of the mud or on the path of growth, we all have a unique journey. And just like the lotus, some of us start in the dirtiest of mud, yet as we rise and grow, we blossom into something beautiful, unique, and truly one of a kind. To all of my visionaries out there, keep rising and growing as you create your own Lotus Effect.